Hello, good morning, or good evening, whenever you are watching this. I hope you are doing well. My name is Catherine, and today we are going over my top 21 books of 2021. 2021 was a pretty interesting reading year for me, especially since I very much kind of deviated from what I was generally reading in previous years. In 2021, I got very into romance. I had enjoyed romance in the past, but this year was the year of romance for me. And it was kind of hard to narrow it down because I did read 153 or 154, something like that. I read a lot of books, so it was hard to narrow it down. Before we get started, go ahead and hit that thumbs up button. If you haven't already subscribed, go ahead and hit subscribe and let me know down in the comments what your favorite book of 2021 was. So let's just get right into it. These first 11 ones are kind of what I'm calling my honorable mentions. They aren't quite in my top 10. Also, they're in no real particular order. Starting off with one of my more recent reads, I read How to Fail at Flirting by Denise Williams. This book follows Nia Turner, who recently got out of a really bad relationship with a fellow professor in her department. Also, her department that she works for is potentially facing being cut. She needs to relax. She needs to chill. She needs to enjoy herself. And so she creates a list of things that she never does that she wants to learn how to do. One of them is learn how to flirt with a stranger, something like that. She goes to a bar, meets a stranger, they hit it off immediately, and the two of them have kind of a whirlwind romance. I did not expect this book to be so emotional. Definitely check out trigger warnings for this one because there is a lot that happens. I loved Nia and Jake's relationship. I really just loved, even when there were miscommunications, the way they worked through things. I just felt like overall it was so good. And I really am glad that I kind of ended the year with that one. It wasn't the last book that I read of the year, but it was one of the last ones, and I'm really glad I read it. Number 20, sure, let's go with actually numbering these. Number 20 is Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel. This book, oh my gosh, I read this back in March or April, something like that, and did not expect it to be what it was. This book takes place in a post-pandemic world. However, it was written in 2014, so they didn't have any idea that this is potentially what the world would be like. It follows a lot of different people in this kind of post-apocalyptic, post-pandemic world. The way that it's written, it has kind of time jumps of pre-pandemic, during the height of the pandemic, and then the post-pandemic, how the world is kind of recovering. One of the main narratives that it's following is a group of Shakespearean actors that travel from encampment to encampment, performing and trying to bring hope. And I really love the sentiment that it constantly is bringing up, which is that survival is insufficient, meaning that it is not enough to just survive, but we need to thrive, and doing that through art and theater. And it's something that I'm very passionate about. So I really enjoyed that narrative that it was bringing up. And I think it's something that we in 2022 now can really, should really latch onto moving forward. Number 19 is Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. This book, I did not know what to expect as a long-time Leigh Bardugo stan. It was so different than any of her other books that I read in the Grishaverse. So I wasn't sure that I was going to love it as much as I did. It is a dark story about these magical societies at Yale. Oh, it is so good. And I cannot believe that we still don't even have a release date for the next book because it leaves it on such a cliffhanger. I think the magic system and also the conversation around privilege that it brings up is so good. I highly recommend, if you are going to pick it up, please, again, look up trigger warnings, because it is intense. It's a lot, but it's so good. Also, it is definitely more of a new adult to adult book versus Leigh Bardugo's other books, which are solidly young adult. Number 18 is actually technically a book I read at the end of 2020, but I recorded my top 10 books before I ended the year, so we're putting it in here, and that is Kate in Waiting by Becky Albertalli. Love a good Becky Albertalli book. I talked about this book a lot at the beginning of the year and end of last year. Again, this is another like theater kid book. It is a young adult book about a girl named Kate who gets unexpectedly kind of cast as a lead in her school's production of Once Upon a Mattress, a show that I love and adore. It also explores her relationship with her best friend, who the two of them have always kind of shared crushes, and suddenly things get really real when a crush could be something more for the two of them. Yeah, I just really, really appreciated the love for theater kids in this book. Number 7 is Passenger and Wayfarer by Alexandra Bracken. These books kind of were like, oh, wait, Catherine, you actually really like Alexandra Bracken. I hadn't read any of her books before, despite being a fairly prominent author for a very long time. Still haven't read the Darkest Mind series. I want to, though. I will eventually. This series involves time travel, which is so cool, and just the whole system of time travel is really interesting. I loved the characters. I love that the villains weren't always villainous and the good guys weren't always good. I love that sort of morally gray, who is right and who is wrong type of stories, and I think Alexandra Bracken does that really well. Number 16 is, of course, Rule of Wolves by Leigh Bardugo. Surprisingly enough, this isn't, in my top 10, even though I absolutely love the Grishaverse with all my heart and soul. The King of Scars duology just isn't one of my favorites. I think that it has some really wonderful moments, and I love the characters that we have in there, especially the characters that we already have connections to: Nikolai, Zoya, Tamar, Toya, Jenya, and David. I absolutely love this. I think that it was a wonderful way to end this kind of universe while still leaving it open-ended enough for potential to continue writing in it. I think Leigh Bardugo was really smart because it was a satisfying ending, but it still leaves us wanting more. And I've mentioned this before, that the whole sort of Grishaverse, rereading those books, made my heart so happy, and the friends that I made in my Grishaverse reread the Grisha read-along, I will forever love that moment in time. It was a better time, January through April. I'm just gonna say that. Number 15 is going to be Brazen and the Beast by Sarah MacLean. There are several Sarah MacLean books on this list because I love Sarah MacLean's writing. Brazen and the Beast is book number 2 in her Bare Knuckle Bastard series. However, I have said this to everyone I recommend Sarah MacLean's books to. You kind of got to read all of her books in order, in publication order, because they all take place in the same universe, and there's characters that make appearances in other books. So please, if you read any of her books, read them in order, and it's totally worth it. All of her books are amazing. Brazen and the Beast follows Hattie, who's about to turn 30, and she's declared this is her year, and she is kind of taking control of her life. She wants to run her father's company, and it's just such a good story. Her relationship with Beast, aka Wit, aka... I love him so much. I just love their relationship. I love the way that Hattie is also talked about in the book, because she is a plus-size heroine, and we stan plus-size heroines on this channel, and she is just so strong and powerful, but also vulnerable, and I love her. Number 4 is Do You Want to Start a Scandal by Tessa Dare. I also got very into Tessa Dare's books. I haven't read all of her books yet. I'm kind of took a break from her books because I got into like contemporaries, and also started to get back into fantasies after reading several of her books. This one is definitely one of my favorites of hers. It is kind of hard to explain because she has 2 different series. She has her Spindle Cove series, which is great, her Castles Ever After series, which I also really enjoyed, and then this is a crossover book at the end of both those series, and it actually involved like 2 of my favorite characters from both of those series. It involves Charlotte, whose mother is determined to get her married, and she really wants her to get together with this, oh, is he a duke? Oh, a Marquess. Pierce, who we see from the Castles Ever After series. And of course, Charlotte is like, nah, Mom, you gotta stop trying to set me up with people. And Piers is a very like grumpy type hero, very mysterious. I love their dynamic. The grumpy sunshine trope is always fantastic. It involves a sort of mystery element to it as well, which I really loved. So I definitely think it is such a good kind of like conclusion to those 2 series, bringing them together. Number 13 is That Time I Got Drunk and Saved a Demon. This book was so unexpected and so wonderful. It is a fantasy romance about a girl named Cinnamon. Her parents are spice farmers. I love that for her. She accidentally saves a demon and finds out that this like goddess that all of the villages around her kind of worship and follow is actually not a good person. So they go on this like mission together. They are reluctant allies to kind of take this goddess down. It's so cheesy and so fun. It's one of those books that just does not take itself seriously, and I love that in a book. Sometimes I just need to read a book that is literally just there to have fun, and that is definitely one of those. Number 12 is Love Hypothesis by Ali Hazelwood. This book blew up on Book Talk for a good reason, because it's really good. I was expecting a fun, cheesy rom-com. I expected to enjoy it, but I didn't expect too much from it, and I loved this book. It involves Olive and Adam, who have to fake date, basically for her to convince her best friend that it's okay. She's moved on from the guy that she was dating, and he's trying to convince like the head of the department that he is setting down ties here in whatever school they're at, so that the professor will, or the head of the department will release funding to him. And it is so good. I love Olive and Adam's relationship. It is so much more like emotional than I expected. Not quite as emotional as How to Fail at Flirting, but definitely like in that sort of realm where they just, when they show their vulnerabilities, it's just so good. Speaking of books that deserve the hype, coming in at number 11 is People We Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry. It's a sort of loosely When Harry Met Sally sort of retelling, but better because I don't actually like When Harry Met Sally. It is about Poppy and Alex, who every year would go on vacation every single summer. Sometimes it was like really like kind of glamorous vacation. Sometimes it was really not. Until 2 years ago when something happened and they stopped talking to each other, which is really rough because they were best friends. Poppy is just having a whole breakdown, which like same girl, and reaches out to Alex to try and fix whatever is between them. And they go on one last vacation together to save their friendship, and it's so good. I loved Alex and Poppy's relationship, even though it was messy, but it just felt so real. And there were several moments in there where I was like, yeah, as someone in their mid-20s, I relate to all of this. All right, so that's 21 through 11. Again, the orders kind of shift depending on my mood. Now we are going to get into top 10. I will say these also kind of shift around. I know they're in my top 10, but they do kind of move around, except for like, I would say the top 5. The top 5 are solidly in my top 5. But you know, I don't like to commit to anything, so coming in at number 10 is Neon Gods by Katie Robert. Katie Robert is another author that I just fell in love with this year. I absolutely love her writing style. Neon Gods is another one that just became very popular. It is a Hades and Persephone retelling in a sort of like mob vibe sort of way. It's very loose Hades and Persephone retelling, which is fine by me. I'm good with that. It is about Persephone, who gets promised to Zeus, who is not a great guy. He is the head of the 13. The 13 are the like important people of the city. He's not a great guy. His past like 3 or 4 wives have all mysteriously died. And Persephone's not holding out hope that things would be better for her. So she runs away to the lower city, and there she meets Hades, who is a myth. Like, people don't think that Hades actually exists, but he does. And they start a relationship, and it is so good. It's so like spicy, and Katie Roberts knows how to write the spice but also have like the connection between the characters, because I feel like a lot of the times when you have a really like spicy book, authors forget that there needs to be an emotional connection to the characters in order for us to like actually care about them. And she does such a good job of it. Number 9 is If We Were Villains by M.L. Rio. This book, I have a whole reading vlog where I read this one and Station 11, and this book is so good. It's a mystery sort of thriller book, which is not my normal genre, but of course it involves theater. So many of these books involve theater. I wonder why that is. It is about Oliver, who has just served 10 years in jail. He has just been released, and he is met by the detective who put him in jail, who is now retired. And the detective is like, dude, I know that what the story that you sold me is not the real story. Can you tell me what actually happened? So we have a bit of a time jump back in time to when he was in college at this like Shakespeare conservatory program, and everything leads up to the murder of one of his classmates. It is so good and so well written. It brought up a lot from my days in theater school, some of it good, some of it not so good, and it really dug into like theater school, how not great and cultish it can kind of be, but also love for the arts, love for theater, love for Shakespeare, all that fun stuff. And just the way that it's written and the characters are so good and like emotionally connected, and I just loved it. Number 8 is One Last Stop by Casey McQuiston. I absolutely loved this book, and I loved that it was kind of a like magical realism type story. This follows August, who one day on the subway meets Jane, a mysterious stranger who is apparently stuck on the subway and can't get off the Q train. August, who is a bit of a child detective growing up, is determined to figure out Jane's past. Jane doesn't remember anything about her past or who she was or why she's stuck on this train. So August is trying to figure out what happened and who Jane is. And in the meantime, of course, they fall in love, which is a bit difficult when the other person can't leave a subway car. This is another book that just really was like, wow, yeah, mid-20s. Rough. I love the sense of community in this book. I think that is something that's really important when telling queer stories, and it definitely had that like community, found family feel to it that I absolutely loved. Number 7 is Act Your Age, Evie Brown by Talia Hibbert. This is the 3rd book in the Brown Sisters trilogy, and honestly, each of the books are better than the last one, which is fantastic. It follows Evie Brown, who is a bit of a mess, doesn't quite have her life together, always kind of flinting from one job to another, and her parents kind of threaten to cut her off, so she gets a job at a bed and breakfast after hitting the owner with her car. It is a very classic grumpy sunshine situation. I absolutely love Evie and Jacob's relationship. And their kind of care for each other, even though they don't like each other at first. It has a lot of like great explorations of self that I just really enjoyed. Evie figuring out who she is, and it's just so good. Oh gosh. Number 6 is Last Night at the Telegraph Club by Melinda Lowe. Oh, this book is so heartbreaking. It's a YA with a little bit more mature theme, so upper YA, but it is about Lily, who is a Chinese American teenager growing up in the 50s in San Francisco, Chinatown. It's in the midst of like the Red Scare, so she's facing a lot of kind of racial problems, and on top of that, she is figuring out her sexuality after she comes across a clipping for an advertisement of the Telegraph Club, which is a lesbian bar that has like drag performers. Her and another girl at her school end up having feelings for each other and going to this Telegraph Club. And it's another one that really explores the importances of communities and places of acceptance, especially in the queer community. And it's so good. It made me cry several times. So many times. And I just really loved seeing Lily like figure out things about her family and figure things out about herself, and that like classic coming of age. Getting into my top 5. Let's go. Number 5 is These Violent Delights by Chloe Gong. It seems so long ago. I mean, it was literally like a year ago that I read this book. It seems so much longer. I loved it so much. It is a 1920s Romeo and Juliet retelling that takes place in Shanghai. It, of course, involves 2 gangs, the Scarlets, the Scarlets and the White Roses. And we have Roma in the White Roses, and that's like the Russian gang. And then we have Juliet, who is the daughter of the head of the Scarlets, who is the Chinese gang. What I loved about this book is that you're kind of just thrown into it. Roma and Juliet already have a previous relationship where they met when they were like younger teenagers, and they had a whole thing, and then of course one of them betrays the other, but it has that lovers to enemies to, we don't know quite, we obviously still have feelings for each other, but like we can't be lovers because we're enemies. And I loved the writing. I loved the relationship. I loved the atmosphere. The atmosphere of the world was just so rich, and it really got me in the feels. Definitely cried several times. I feel like my top 5 books are like what made me cry the most. That being said, coming in at number 4 is 10 Ways to Be Adored When Landing a Lord by Sarah MacLean. Told you there's a couple Sarah MacLeans on here. 10 Ways is Sarah MacLean's second book, the second book in the Love by Numbers series, I believe it's called. And I still cannot get certain scenes out of my head because they just literally made me swoon so much. It follows Isabel Townsend, who runs a home for women who are in trouble, daughters of earls who have gotten pregnant, women who need a place to get back up on their feet. In comes Nicholas, who is looking for the sister of an earl, I believe he is, who has disappeared. He's also been named the Lord to Land by some gossip column type deal. The two of them, their relationship is so good. The respect that they have for each other. I know the bar is on the ground. Wow, they respect each other. Amazing. But the mutual respect for each other's intelligence. But also Nicholas is so just in awe of Isabel, and he calls her beauty. And it just makes me, it is so good. And it was just really what sold me on Sarah MacLean's writing. Number 3 is A Lot Like Adios by Alexis Daria. This is kind of unexpected only because I didn't like You Had Me at Hola as much. It was good, but it definitely wasn't my favorite. A Lot Like Adios. Oh, so good. It is a second chance romance where these two best friends who grew up next to each other, they accidentally hook up on the day of their graduation, and then they never speak to each other again. So this is 11 years later, when Gabriel's business partner accidentally hires Michelle to help them with their marketing. They reconnect and immediately the chemistry is there. I love their relationship. I really love books where they have kind of an established relationship. I mean, I love a good meet cute, but when they already have history together, it's something that just makes the relationship and the chemistry that much stronger. There are so many times in the book that I just want to shake them and be like, tell them that you miss each other and that you care about each other and that you just want to be together. Just talk. But I loved it because it just made the tension so good. And when they finally come together, it's just like so satisfying. Number 2 is All the Feels by Olivia Dade. I'd say like All the Feels and Spoiler Alert together are like number 2. If I had to choose one over the other, I'd say All the Feels, but the two of them together are my number 2 spot. Sorry, not sorry. So we have Spoiler Alert, which follows April, who writes fan fiction. She meets this guy on a fan fiction website and they become best friends. She doesn't realize that he's the head actor in the show they write fan fiction about. She posts a photo on Twitter of her cosplaying that goes viral for not great reasons because she's plus sized and people are assholes. So Marcus decides to ask her out on a date, not knowing that this is his best friend from the fanfiction website, and just immediately sparks fly. They're so cute. All the Feels follows Marcus's co-star, Alex, who is a little bit of a disaster, known to get into some trouble, so he gets assigned a minder by the show, Lauren. What I loved about this is it's a very slow burn, and they immediately have like really great banter and really great like kind of relationship, but it's not like a sparks fly. They can't resist each other. The two of them learn to really love each other. Both of these books just are such a like love letter to fandom and what a great community fandom can be, while also being fairly toxic to people who aren't the cis het white straight size beauty standard. I absolutely love Olivia Dade's writing. I've talked about this several times on my channel about how she just writes such real flawed people, and their relationships and who they are just feels so real. And it's not just about the romance, even though it is a romance. It's also about them growing as people, and I absolutely love that about these two books. Finally, my number 1 book of 2021 was Real by Kennedy Ryan. Another wonderful book about theater. Wow, I actually didn't realize how many of my top books were about theater. But another wonderful book about theater and film and television, which is great. This follows Neva, who is about to make her Broadway debut. She is an understudy and she is called to understudy the lead of this show. On that particular night, someone she worked with in the past comes to see her and brings Cannon Holt, who is a very well-known, renowned film director. He is currently trying to cast the lead in the biopic of this jazz singer during the Harlem Renaissance, I believe. He sees Neva on stage and just immediately knows this girl is meant to be the lead. The story has that old Hollywood feel to it. It is emotional, it is steamy, the characters are just so real and raw and vulnerable and had me sobbing so many times. I started it and I could not put it down because it was just so good. Their relationship is just so raw. I absolutely fell in love with the two of them and Kennedy Ryan's writing style. It also talks about family and community, and it is so emotional. There's a lot of mental health struggles that happen, as well as physical and chronic. Our main character, Neva, she has lupus. So there is a lot of talk about that and her having to deal with a chronic illness. This book is just by far one of my absolute favorite books of the year. It's so hard to describe the feeling that it gave me while reading, because it felt so validating in so many ways, the way that it talks about theater and storytelling. So there we go. Wow, that took a while. I forgot what it's like to talk about 21 books, but here we are. Once again, please let me know what your favorite book of 2021 was down in the comments below. And if you haven't already, go ahead and like this video and be sure to hit subscribe. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and until next time, bye!